While smoke rose from damaged Japanese positions on Makin, American combat engineers laid metal mats across the soft sand to let tracked and wheeled vehicles move without getting stuck. The American 193rd Tank Battalion played a crucial role in capturing Makin in the Pacific in 1943. Makin was expected to be an easy target. On November 20th, 1943, 3,500 well-trained American soldiers invaded the Central Pacific Atoll, located 2,000 miles southwest of Hawaii in the Gilbert Islands. They faced only around 200 Japanese naval infantrymen and about 500 support personnel and civilian laborers. The plan was to crush Makin's defenders with heavy air and naval bombardments, followed by a quick amphibious landing. U.S. commanders estimated the mission would take just 2 days. In reality, the operation quickly unraveled. The wooden landing craft couldn't cross Makin's barrier reef, forcing American riflemen to wade 250 yards to shore under intense machine gun fire. Key equipment like flamethrowers, rocket launchers, and radios were soaked and rendered useless, costing lives. Japanese snipers, hidden among downed trees and craters, inflicted heavy casualties. Officers were prime targets, and one American regimental commander was shot between the eyes while rallying troops. Demoralized, the infantrymen stopped advancing and sought cover. The invasion risked stalling. Then, the sound of American tank cannons broke through the chaos. Armored vehicles had made it ashore. Their firepower destroyed enemy bunkers and silenced snipers. With tanks supporting them, U.S. troops pushed forward into Makin's main defenses. Though the battle for Makin has faded from memory, overshadowed by the brutal fight for Tarawa, it was a significant operation. The two battles took place simultaneously, but the 2nd Marine Division's bloody seizure of Tarawa got the attention back home. Over 1,600 Americans and 4,600 Japanese died at Tarawa, compared to lighter losses at Makin. Still, Makin was the first U.S. Army amphibious assault in the Central Pacific during World War II. Lessons from the operation shaped later campaigns in Saipan, the Philippines, and Okinawa. Makin also saw the combat debut of medium tanks in a Pacific landing. It was the only time American M3 Lee medium tanks fought the Japanese. The Lee was a stopgap tank design with a 37mm turret-mounted cannon and a 75mm hull gun, reflecting older World War I tank concepts. Since the M4 Sherman wasn't yet widely available, the Lee filled the gap, despite its large silhouette and outdated design. The tanks at Makin came from the 193rd Tank Battalion, formed in January 1941 from 4 National Guard tank companies. The 30th from Fort Georgia, the 31st from Ozark, Alabama, the 36th from Houston, Texas, and the 45th from Denver, Colorado. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, the 193rd was at Fort Benning, Georgia. Within 9 days, they were re-equipped with worn-out M3 light tanks from the 2nd Armored Division and shipped west to Angel Island, then to Hawaii. Most of the crew had never trained on an M3 Stuart before deployment. Arriving in Honolulu on January 7, 1942, the 193rd was among the first reinforcements in Hawaii. More forces arrived in February, including the 27th Infantry Division, also a National Guard unit. That division took on garrison duty across Hawaii's islands. Starting in November, the 27th began rigorous jungle warfare training, and the 193rd Tank Battalion also intensified training and upgraded equipment. By 1943, the battalion transitioned from light M3 Stuart tanks to a mix of light and medium tanks. Crews had to quickly adapt from nimble Stuarts to the heavy, diesel-powered M3A5 Lee tanks, which carried a 37mm turret gun, a 75mm hull-mounted cannon, and 230 caliber machine guns. It took 7 men to operate a Lee. Companies A and B of the 193rd used these mediums, while Company C used the lighter M3A1 tanks, which weighed 16 tons and carried similar armament scaled for smaller vehicles. Each company in the 193rd had 3 5-tank platoons, plus 2 additional tanks for the company commander and executive officer. Whether in light or medium tanks, the battalion brought strong firepower, armor, and mobility to the battlefield. Another key vehicle was the WW2 Alligator, a 14-ton amphibious tractor capable of carrying 24 soldiers or 4,500 pounds of cargo straight onto beaches. Though unarmored, its reliability in water and on land made it invaluable to invasion planners. As the 193rd trained, U.S. leaders in Hawaii focused on launching a counterattack in the Central Pacific. By summer 1943, American victories in the Southwest Pacific and the Aleutian Islands shifted momentum. With Japanese expansion halted, U.S. commanders aimed to recapture lost island bases. The Gilbert Islands, 13 coral atolls along the equator, formed Japan's outer defensive line. From airfields on Makin, Tarawa, and Nauru, Japanese flying boats could threaten American supply lines, making them priority targets. Admiral Chester Nimitz saw the Gilberts as a crucial step in his island-hopping strategy. Capturing them would open the path to the Marshall and Mariana Islands and ultimately bring U.S. forces closer to Japan. By August, Operation Galvanic, the invasion of the Gilberts, was finalized. Vice Admiral Raymond Spruance commanded the Central Pacific Force. Rear Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner led the amphibious landings, and Major General Holland Smith oversaw ground operations. The plan called for simultaneous assaults on Tarawa and Nauru, with the 2nd Marine Division attacking Tarawa and elements of the 27th Infantry Division assigned to Nauru. Scheduled for November 15, 1943, the operation was later revised. Planners dropped Nauru, concerned it was too far from Tarawa to support in case of a Japanese counterattack. Instead, the 27th Division would target Makin, 105 miles north of Tarawa. It wasn't Makin's first encounter with U.S. forces. In August 1942, Marine raiders led by Lieutenant Colonel Evans Carlson landed from submarines USS Nautilus and USS Argonaut. After 2 days of fighting, they withdrew with valuable intelligence, which helped the later invasion planners. Makin Atoll forms a triangle of reefs and islands, the largest of which is Butaritari, shaped like a crutch and stretching 13 miles long, but only about 500 yards wide. It is thickly vegetated with ponds, marshes, and coconut plantations. Thousands of deep pits for cultivating taro root further limited movement across the island. Aerial reconnaissance showed a strong Japanese presence on Butaritari. Analysts identified aircraft ramps, maintenance buildings, a command center, radio facilities, and gun positions, mostly pointed toward the ocean, where Carlson's raiders had attacked before. The lagoon side, with 4 piers, appeared less defended, guarding the flanks of Butaritari's main defenses. The citadel consisted of 2 zigzag trenches called the West and East Tank Barrier systems. These fortifications were crucial to the assault force's tactical plan. Intelligence officers estimated that the enemy garrison consisted of 280 naval infantrymen from the 3rd Special Base Force under Lieutenant Seiso Ishikawa, along with stranded air personnel and civilian construction workers. The total enemy strength was approximately 800 men. The defense included several howitzers, dual-purpose anti-aircraft and anti-tank guns, and 2 Type 95 light tanks. Numerous machine gun bunkers and rifle pits also dotted the area. Major General Ralph C. Smith, commander of the 27th Division, assigned the assault on Makin to the 165th Regimental Combat Team, RCT, led by Colonel Gardner Conroy. The 165th Infantry traced its lineage to the Fighting 69th of Civil War fame. Supporting the 165th were various units, including artillery, signal, engineering, and medical detachments, as well as the 3rd Battalion of the 105th Infantry Regiment for use as a special landing force. In late September, the 193rd Tank Battalion received orders attaching it to the operation. Lieutenant Colonel Harmon L. Edmondson, commander of the 193rd, learned that his medium tanks from Company A and light tanks from Company C were now part of the Makin operation, which was scheduled to begin in just 6 weeks. Edmondson received an unusual request from the 27th Division, which wanted to use LVT-1s to land the special detachments, though no one knew how to operate the amphibious tractors. Using the one available alligator on Oahu, Major Enel Insky formed a team from the headquarters company, training them to become LVT drivers in just 2 weeks. Eventually, 48 factory new LVT-1s arrived in time to load onto the landing ship tanks, LSTs, bound for Makin. Preparations for battle were intense, leaving little time for tank infantry coordination. Tank crews also discovered that their radios were incompatible with those used by the 165th RCT. There wasn't enough time to resolve these issues through rehearsals. On November 10th, Company A of the 193rd loaded its medium tanks onto landing craft tanks, LCTs, which were carried by a landing ship dock named USS Belle Grove. The vessel could flood its deck to float the LCTs. Company C's light tanks were loaded onto smaller landing craft mechanized, LCMs, and distributed among the fleet. The Northern Task Force, -5 slow LSTs carrying the LVT-1s, which had departed 5 days earlier, set sail for Makin. During the journey, B-24 Liberator bombers from the 7th Air Force heavily bombed Butaro, the main Japanese stronghold. Onala received even more extensive pre-invasion bombardment. This was part of Operation Galvanic, a major offensive aimed at launching Admiral Nimitz's Central Pacific island-hopping campaign. The operation was set to begin on Saturday, November 20th, 1943. The invasion opened at 8:30 a.m. with 2 battalion landing teams hitting Butaro's western shore at beaches labeled Red 1 and Red 2. The 1st and 2nd platoons of Company C, 193rd Tank Battalion, riding M3A1 light tanks, joined this force. They aimed to advance 2 miles east to the West Tank Barrier System, assuming the landings went smoothly. At 10:30, another team was to land on Yellow Beach, striking the center of the island near On Chong's and King's Wharfs. This wave included 17 M3A5 medium tanks from Company A and 5 light tanks from Company C. Their mission was to cut across the island and then turn west to link with forces advancing from the Red Beaches. Special landing detachments from the 315th Infantry, riding LVT-1s, would lead each wave, secure landing zones, and block Japanese attempts to retreat or counterattack. If executed properly, this maneuver would trap the defenders between 2 U.S. forces. However, the plan had critical flaws. Coordinating 2 converging units was risky without excellent communication and leadership, both of which were lacking in the inexperienced 165th RCT. Additionally, the Japanese were not where U.S. intelligence expected them. The massive pre-invasion bombardment had minimal impact, serving only to create more cover for the defenders. Despite these challenges, American forces had the advantage in troop numbers, armor, and naval firepower. By the early morning of November 20th, confidence was high as naval guns opened fire. Landing craft began assembling west of Makin, forming assault waves. After Navy fighters strafed the island, the invasion began at 8:29 a.m., 1 minute early. The first LVTs rolled onto Red Beaches 1 and 2, and troops from the 315th Infantry disembarked in eerie silence, initially meeting no resistance. They thought Makin would be easy. 5 minutes later, LCMs carrying Company C's light tanks approached. Second Lieutenant Murray C. Engel recalled that tanks were sealed except for the commander's hatches. When they neared shore, an unexpected reef forced the LCM to drop its ramp 40 feet from land. Engel's tank, equipped with a deep-water fording trunk, advanced without trouble. The others followed successfully to designated assembly areas. Meanwhile, U.S. infantry began advancing eastward but soon met growing resistance. Snipers in trees and hidden machine guns disrupted the advance. Second Lieutenant Daniel T. Nunnery was killed in an ambush that wounded others. Chaplain Captain Stephen J. M. was shot while rendering aid. Colonel Conroy, the regimental commander, was killed after standing in full view of a Japanese position. Leadership then passed to Lieutenant Colonel Gerard W. Kelly. Despite the need, the light tanks stayed idle in assembly areas. It took 3 hours to sort out command confusion and get them moving. Initially, tank crews wouldn't take orders from infantry officers. Captain Charles B. Tobin finally got them going, but precious time was lost. The tanks moved in a column down a narrow coral road, with crews filling shell craters by hand to allow passage. By 2 p.m., the tanks caught up and advanced under sniper and machine gun fire. They knocked out one machine gun, and though one tank got stuck in a shell hole, the crew recovered it under fire. By 4 p.m., they neared their objective at the West Tank Barrier System and linked up with medium tanks advancing from another direction. The Yellow Beach assault faced stiffer resistance. After a naval bombardment, landing craft entered Makin's lagoon at 9:52 a.m. The first wave of LVTs, driven by 193rd personnel, was caught in crossfire from enemy machine guns hidden on King's Wharf and sunken ships. U.S. troops returned fire and pushed ashore. Company A's medium tanks, still aboard LCTs, joined the fight. Sergeant Wilbur R. Johnson recalled using his 37mm cannon to clear enemy hulks on the beach as the battle intensified. I also fired several bursts of machine gun fire at the wharf where enemy guns were visible. What wasn't visible was a coral reef stretching 250 yards underwater into the lagoon, which blocked the passage of flat-bottom landing craft. This forced the infantry to wade through waist-deep water, ruining their radios, bazookas, and flamethrowers. Meanwhile, they were hit with Japanese automatic weapons fire the whole way to shore. Tanks, although equipped with wading stacks, faced a greater challenge. Shell holes created by pre-invasion bombardment were hidden beneath the surface. These craters were invisible to tank drivers. Captain Robert S. Brown, commander of Company A, lost his M3A5 to one such crater, as did Sergeant J.O. Newby, commander of Medium No. 17th. Newby recalled moving forward about 25 yards before hitting a shell hole. After escaping it, they hit another 15 yards later. The water was 7 feet deep and their tank drowned out. Smoke filled the tank and the crew exited quickly. But as soon as they got out, they were hit by machine gun fire from the shore, forcing them to climb back in. Those vehicles that reached land were still not safe. Lieutenant Colonel Edmondson said that once they made it to the beach, they were slowed by pits, shell holes, coconut trees, and a burning fuel dump. Sergeant Henry F. Netter, commanding Medium No. 2, was maneuvering his tank off a stump when the enemy appeared. He fired about 100 rounds at Japanese troops running along the ocean side. With their position stuck, no other gun could assist. In total, 12 medium and 4 light tanks survived the landing and went straight into action against Japanese fortifications. Communication problems between the tanks and infantry made coordination nearly impossible. With limited visibility through periscopes, tank crews had trouble identifying targets, often holding fire out of fear of hitting their own men. Captain Wayne S. E. Sykes of the 193rd stepped in and used hand signals to guide a platoon of medium tanks toward enemy rifle pits. Their 75mm shells easily destroyed the log dugouts. As the troops advanced into the citadel, they encountered concrete pillboxes resistant to tank fire. Infantry, tank crews, and engineers improvised a method of attack. Lieutenant Colonel John F. McDonogh described the process. A tank would blast a revetment with its main gun, then engineers would push in a TNT charge using a pole. By 5 p.m., they had eliminated 10 to 15 enemy positions this way. Japanese resistance began to collapse. Some tanks bypassed the citadel to link with light tanks from Red Beach, while others advanced toward the ocean side and discovered abandoned enemy gun placements. Tanks heading east were forced to retreat due to unexpectedly strong fire near King's Wharf. That night brought a temporary lull. The 193rd assembled their tanks and LVT-1s for maintenance. However, bad landing conditions kept supplies from reaching them. As night fell, the enemy became active again. Snipers took up positions, and others probed American lines. Nervous sentries opened fire frequently. Second Lieutenant George P. Evans recalled many soldiers accidentally fired at one another. 2 tankers were killed that night while leaving their foxholes in pursuit of enemy infiltrators, possibly by friendly fire. Another commander was shot through the hatch by a Japanese sniper. At dawn on November 21st, enemy gunners had reoccupied King's Wharf and were hitting Yellow Beach with machine gun fire. 4 medium tanks moved up and silenced them. They then targeted a wrecked Emily seaplane, from which another gun was firing. 18 Japanese bodies were found in the wreckage. Sniper activity prompted the use of light tanks to drag supply pallets from Red Beach to the center of the battlefield. A Navy dive bomber mistakenly dropped its bombs on 4 M3A1 tanks, killing nearby infantrymen. By 11 a.m., the tanks were refueled and rearmed and joined Lieutenant Colonel MacD's battalion for a frontal assault on Japanese positions guarding the East Tank Barrier. The terrain made movement difficult, but American coordination improved. Sergeant Johnson in Medium No. 8 wrote that they had full infantry support and moved slowly under enemy fire. When they encountered a machine gun, the infantry pulled back and the tank destroyed it with a 75mm round. Light tanks on the lagoon side helped riflemen gain 1,000 yards of contested ground, though the enemy remained determined. The East Tank Barrier was still under Japanese control and would require a focused attack to capture. On the morning of November 22nd, a U.S. artillery barrage targeted the East Tank Barrier. The fresh 3rd Battalion landing team with tank support surged forward. A captured map helped tank crews destroy enemy positions. By 9:20 a.m., U.S. forces reached the barrier line and found 2 disabled Type 95 tanks. Moving beyond the tank trap, they were again slowed by debris and pits. Sergeant Johnson recalled that they advanced slowly, tanks covering one another with the infantry spread out in a line. Meanwhile, other elements of the 193rd executed a daring amphibious flanking move in their LVTs, attempting to block enemy retreat along the shoreline. Friendly natives later informed officers that the Japanese had already escaped to nearby atolls. Another detachment occupied the island of Kuma and killed 10 fleeing Japanese soldiers.
By the end of